Hi, what's up? Okay, I'm on answerthepublic.com, so you can basically type in any search term and it will tell you the most searched questions across the internet for a certain key term. So I typed in INTJ. We have 387 results, 78 main results. So I'm just going to try to rapid fire go through these questions, but I don't want this video to be 40 minutes long. So I'm just going to kind of rapid fire go through these. The response may be kind of incomplete. So if there's a particular question you want me to go more in depth on, leave it in the comments, and then maybe I'll do another video kind of expanding upon one of the questions answered in here. Okay, can an INTJ be social? Yeah, I would say that any type can be social. Any type can be anything. What I notice about a lot of these questions is that they're kind of like, is it possible for me to do this? And I'll just say in general, my blanket statement is yes, it's possible for you to do anything. You can have a growth mindset. You shouldn't use personality to constrict yourself. If it feels like you're constricting yourself, that's not a good use of the system. Like, the point of the system is to expand yourself and grow yourself beyond your limitations. And I think certain types are more talented in certain areas, but I think audacity beats talent any day. Okay, so can an INTJ be social? I would say their functions are not really set up to be social. NI isn't, TE isn't really. It's kind of like at work, maybe commanding people, not particularly social. FI, no. So really SE is, I think, what INTJs can draw from. So I recommend developing SE. I've talked about in another video, which I can link. That I recommend trying to develop SE maybe 15% more. And I think that's what you can draw from. And then TE is kind of the other extroverted function. So at work, I think you could be more social. But I just think in general, as people get older, they get more and more balanced. So I think as INTJs get older, it becomes easier. Can an INTJ be talkative? I think any type could be talkative. I think the INTJs are probably more talkative about knowledge and things that they're knowledgeable about. I think if you get them outside of their realm of interest or things they're knowledgeable about, they're probably not going to be that talkative. Can an INTJ be funny? I mean, in my opinion, yeah. I think it's kind of like a dry humor. It's not really a class clown type funny, but it's kind of like an understated, under your breath, dry humor type funny in my experience. Can an INTJ become an ENTJ? No, you cannot change personalities over the course of your life. At least that's what is thought at this point in time. But INTJs and ENTJs do have all the same functions. So in my personal pursuit of trying to be better, if I was going to word it in a sloppy way, I guess you could say I was trying to become an INTJ. I was trying to become an ENTJ. I basically tried to get around ENTJs, mimic ENTJs, do actions that they did, do things that they did. I think it's like if you set your goal, to become an ENTJ, it's like you overset your goal too high. You're probably not going to reach it. It's kind of it's like a stupid saying. Shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So it's like shoot for becoming an ENTJ, and then you'll never become an ENTJ. You know what I mean? Like your TE is not going to usurp your NI. But if you try to become a TE user, then maybe your TE will become more developed than it had been developed if you hadn't pursued that. That's just a very roundabout, unclear way to describe all that. But basically, no, you cannot become an ENTJ. Even if you try, you cannot become an ENTJ, but you should try to develop your TE, in my opinion. Can an INTJ be an extrovert? So the I means that you're an introvert, but you do have introverted functions and extroverted functions. So at certain moments in time, you can pull on your extroverted functions, and then more moments in time than other moments in time, you'll pull on your introverted functions. Can an INTJ be a doctor? I would say yeah. Any type can be a doctor. I wouldn't use personality to restrict your career choice. That's kind of hands-on, which I think lower down SE doesn't like. I think it's good to develop SE. I don't necessarily think it's good to pick your career based on development. That's after my personal experience. I was like, okay, if I'm a teacher, this will help me with TE and organizing a big group of people and being around groups of people all day and being part of an organization. And it definitely did help me develop TE, but I didn't like it. So I wouldn't pick your career in line with a personal growth goal if you don't like it. Can an INTJ be lazy? Yes, absolutely. Because I think FI in the third spot is quite a lazy function. And it's like, I'm not in the mood to be productive. So that's why it's so important to develop TE. Like I said, that's why it's been important for me to try to act more like an ENTJ, because it brings productivity and purpose back into your life. Can an INTJ be emotional? Yes. Their third function is FI, and especially if you're unhealthy. And the way I define unhealthy is like you're in your third function too much, so it's kind of like circular reasoning. But yes, if you're in your third function, FI too much, you can be very emotional. And people's third function tends to be kind of immature, overused, especially when they're young. So especially if an INTJ is young, they can be quite emotional. When INTJ says, I love you. I think when INTJ says I love you, that's like a massive deal. I mean, I think that the good thing about FI in the third spot is it's like a precious little, it's like a pure little heart that you like protect. It's like the INTJs have this outer shell, and then there's like this precious little FI part of them that actually gets very attached to people and loves people very deeply, but they don't express it that much. So if they get to the point of expressing it and saying I love you, I think that's a pretty big deal. But I think INTJs love more people than they let on. When INTJ is in love, I think they get quite attached. It's like there is an outer shell that INTJs have. It's like this NITE that you show people. And then there is, after a long, long time of getting to know them, because you're not going to show your SE or your FI very much, but after a time of doing that, it's kind of like this ISFP side, and ISFPs are very sentimental, and once you get inside there, I mean, INTJs are kind of just, my husband Garrett describes me as a dragon on the outside and like a stuffed teddy bear on the inside, which I don't appreciate that analogy, but it's probably accurate. When INTJ is angry, I think that probably has to do with FI. In my opinion, in arguments, people will go down to their third function. It's like in normal day-to-day life, you use your first and second function. And if you're in an argument, it means that those first two functions have not worked out for you. So then you're like, okay, I'll try another approach. So you try your third function, which is FI. For me, that hasn't manifested so much as anger, but I could see, I think that in men, for example, anger is much more socially appropriate. I just thought there was a study done on male and female emotions, and when they were looking at adrenaline levels and I think cortisol and heartbeat, anyways, they were looking at all these biological factors, and they were trying to arouse an emotional response in male and female subjects, and the guys had the more intense bodily response, but in outward expressiveness, it didn't express it as much, with the exception of anger. And so what they theorized was that even though men have, the same, right, not the same, but emotion, they have at least it looks like a more intense emotional response. It looks like because of social conditioning, anger is the only one that actually gets expressed, and the others are repressed. And then in women, it was the positive emotions and sadness that were expressed, but anger was not. It was a repressed one. Anyways, I digress. So anyways, all I have to say is that I think male INTJs are probably more likely to show anger when they get an FI, and female INTJs probably are more likely to show sadness. What I found is that in arguments, so you go down to your third function, and then so you tried your first and second functions. If that doesn't work, you try your third function, and if that doesn't work, then you try your fourth function. So I've heard of INJs, on occasion, throwing dishes or something, which I think is an SE. That would be very, very, very rare because SE tends to be turned off. When INTJ likes someone, I would just say from my experience, I basically pretend they're not there. I just won't talk. If I had a crush on someone, I wouldn't talk to them. I wouldn't initiate anything. I wouldn't want to show that I was interested. I don't know why I do that. To me, that's kind of weird that I do that. Why is that? Why is that logically going to get me in a relationship with a person by not talking to them? I don't know, but that's what I do. But it's important to note that I do that exact same thing if I don't like someone. So if I really like someone, or if I'm neutral to don't like them, I will just ignore them. When INTJ is hurt. Yeah, this is the third function. That FI in that third spot. It's a very vulnerable, little, pure, little, very delicate little function. So I think INTJs, I can get my feelings hurt pretty good sometimes. When INTJ falls in love, when INTJ likes you, we've already kind of gone through this. Are INTJs smart? I think any type could be smart. Are INTJs autistic? I think any type could be autistic. There are studies done on, what is the database called? There's a personality database where they have a list of all these studies. Are INTJ and ENFP compatible? I would say I really enjoy my time with the ENFPs. They have to be healthy, and again, I define healthy as you've developed your second function. Any types who are unhealthy, which I define in the personality context as in a loop, I do not like basically any type that's in a loop. If they're in your first and third function too much, I do not like it. But if an ENFP has a good FI developed, I really enjoy it. The only thing is, this is a personal thing, is sometimes with dominant NE users, I can get kind of jealous of them having a lot of relationships, which is not a good thing. I just want to feel like the best friend. But ENFPs, I think, want to have a lot of different relationships, so sometimes that can be hard on my end. Are INTJs and INTPs compatible? I really enjoy my relationships with INTPs and conversations with INTPs, especially, again, like if NE on their part is developed, because we can have some very fun conversations. It makes them very funny. INTPs are stinking funny. Now, the thing is, if they're in a loop or if they're too much in TI, sometimes TE and TI are good for each other. It's kind of like an iron sharpens iron. So it's good for each other, but it's just kind of annoying to me sometimes because I speak in broad strokes, and I find that TI and SI as well, and so if they're in a loop, it makes it even worse, but TI and SI take things pretty literally, and I'm almost never speaking literally. Like, I'll say things in a video and people like, oh, you think all INTPs do this? And I'm like, I don't think all INTPs do anything, but I gotta put forth some sort of opinion about what INTPs are like, for example. So sometimes it just makes progress slow because it's always like, you think this, and so it's like on The Giver, and they're like, precision of language, and I feel like I'm always getting reprimanded for not having precise enough language if they're too much in TI and SI. But if they're in NE, then I think that gives them a little bit more of an open-mindedness and a little bit more of an ability to be like, oh, she meant this, which I enjoy because I do not like explaining myself over and over again. I do not have the SE energy to repeat myself or re-explain myself, but I think it's necessary and it's ultimately good for me. So to answer that question, I think yes. Are INTJs and INFPs compatible? Yes, I really, really enjoy INFPs. Now, the only thing is, once again, they got to be healthy. If you get an unhealthy INFP, meaning they're in the depressive sort of FI, that gets me in depressive sort of FI, and then it's not good for me because I already have an issue with not being in FI too much in a negative way. So yeah, I think they're definitely compatible. INFPs, I'll come out and say, my personal favorite type. Are INTJs evil? Any type could have evil tendencies. That brings up some, like, could any person be evil? Yeah, I think some people would say any type could be evil. I'm just musing to myself at this point. Yeah, I would say yes. Are INTJs and INFJs compatible? I think so. I have had very, very, very good conversations with INTJs and INFJs. It's like they're on the same wavelength as me, and it just makes communication really easy. Now, I think sometimes, me personally, with FE users, we kind of butt heads because I want to be able to speak my mind and be myself and be a distinct, unique person. Whereas with FE, sometimes that uniqueness causes problems. And in the pursuit of you wanting to be your own unique person, you're now being rude to people in the group, and then FJs are going to kind of bring that up. I think the FJ would enjoy the INTJ more when they're in FI, so they're going to try to get the INTJ in FI, and the INTJ is going to enjoy the INFJ more when they're in TI, so they're both going to probably encourage each other to get in loops, which is probably not a good thing, so you'd have to be very conscious of that. But in general, conversations are really good. Are INTJs rare? I think some of these studies are up for question, but I think according to a lot of things you'll find on the internet, yes, INTJs are rare. I think they're the third most rare type according to most stuff you'll find on the internet. I believe that INFJs are the most rare, ENTJs are the next most rare, and INTJs are the next most rare. And I think in women, ENTJs and INTJ women are equally rare. And I think male INFJs are the most rare by gender. I think. But, that's all with a grain of salt. Why INTJs are cold? I think predominantly, I think introverts may in general come off more cold, but there are plenty of introverts that don't come off as cold. And so I think it's the TE-FI axis is kind of a cold axis. FE is kind of the warm axis. It comes off very warm. And so I think any type that doesn't have FE comes off a little colder. Why INTJs don't smile? Okay, this is another one of those FE things. So FE will smile a lot more when it's appropriate, whereas TE-FI users are only going to smile if something genuinely makes them happy. They're not putting up a front. It's like, it's a means to be authentic. And I think, I just never think about that. Until I learned about personality, I didn't think that there were personalities out there that would smile to make other people feel good and not because they generally were happy about something. Like, that didn't ever occur to me that someone would ever do that. Why INTJ is the best? This was in the INFP question also, why INFP is the best. I wonder if every type just types in why their own type is the best. I don't think any type is the best. Why INTJ is so cold? Okay, that's basically the same question. Why INTJ and ENFP belong together? I think in general, I'll tell my theory of compatibility. So I think, well, theoretically, I's do good with E's, N's do good with N's, and then the second two letters both different. So like INTJs have TEFI. So I think people do well with someone of the same judging axis of them, but flipped. So if you're TEFI, you do good with someone who's FITE. And then, because I think judging axes are where you get like your opinions from, and so it's easier to have the same judging axis because you kind of like get each other more. Whereas the perceiving axes are a little bit more open-minded, and it kind of will give you more information if you have a different perceiving axis. So I think INTJs do good with INFPs and ENFPs because they both fit that criteria. Why INTJs are rare? What a question. So presuming the INTJs are rare, why are they rare? I've heard a lot of conceited explanations to this question. Actually, I've heard people say that because of evolution, other sensing types have a more primitive brain, and we've developed into this advanced INTJ brain. Of course, I only hear INTJs saying this. I never hear a censor like perpetuating this idea that they have primitive brains. I don't know. I think in general, INTJs have very specific skill sets that if everyone had those skill sets, I think the world might fall apart. INTJs they have sensing last, so they're not good with their hands, and you need a good chunk of the world, like to be SPs, for example, because someone has to build buildings. Someone has to like working with their hands, and it's better if lots of people enjoy working with their hands. Why INTJs love ENFPs? I think I may have already touched on this. I can't remember, but yeah, I just think the NE function, it generates so much, and it's so bubbly, and it's so optimistic. Like if I'm ever in a rut for video ideas, I'll just call my sister, who's an ENFP, and she will just rattle off like 40 ideas, and then I can kind of latch onto one and go deeper with it. So it's just very creative. I really enjoy that. They think in a really different way, NE and NI, and so they're very synergistic. Whereas the FI function, I just love FI because I'm kind of on the same wavelength, and they're just really authentic, really deep. They're really themselves. I really enjoy that. Why INTJs are dangerous? This is such like a random question. This was on the INFP question too. Why INFPs are dangerous? I think one thing that INTJs do, like if they come into an organization, for example, they find the things that are wrong, and then they'll point it out, and they want it fixed. And so they will really tip over the status quo. They'll just like turn it on its head. And so if you like things the way they've always been, then it can seem a little dangerous. Where to find INTJ guys? The guy part specifically, I'm not sure if it changes it. I'm in my house a lot of the time, so that's kind of unfortunate. But I think in in organizations, they might be their own boss, or they might be a head of an organization, so probably at work. Like INTJ is not going to come out of their shell besides at work. Where to meet an INTJ? In general, I just think the best place to meet people is just to expand your friend groups. You hang out with 99 people that you don't like, so that eventually they'll introduce you to an INTJ if you want. I mean, it's just kind of odd. You got to play the odds game. If if the statistics are correct and 1 out of every 100 people is an INTJ, then just get 100 acquaintances. Odds are you'll find one. Where should an INTJ live? I've thought about this. I really enjoy big cities. The moment, when you drive in on a freeway and then you see the skyline of the city and it opens up and you can kind of see downtown, that is just my favorite. I love freeway systems. I love skyscrapers. I love massive cities. I love being on the ocean. I love being next to big mountains. I love so many West Coast cities. I love the moment when you drive into Seattle. I loved driving into Vancouver, BC. Those just have very panoramic views, those two cities. I love driving into San Francisco. I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, I think big cities are anywhere where there's growth happening. In my experience, I've lived in a small town, and, it's kind of like small for a reason. I mean, it's not growing. So I think INTJs are so growth-oriented that you're just going to want a place that is growing. And that's not going to be all cities. There are some cities definitely on the decline, but if you can find a place where there's a lot of growth. Who should INTJ female marry? Okay, so here's the deal. So I'm married to, so my technical advice is you find someone with same judging axis as you flipped, and then ends with ends, and then, and introverts could be with introverts, or they could be with extroverts. So my advice would be INFP or ENFP for the INTJ. However, I'm with an ISFP instead of an INFP, so I'm with an S instead of an N. And it's actually working out really, really, really well for the sake of like managing each other's blind spots with the N and the S different. Like there are cons. Like I think it's hard to say. I've been in relationships with another N. I've been in relationships with another S, and I don't know. I think ultimately what's best for me is for an N to be with an S. Like I think that there are some hurdles to overcome, but I think in general for my growth, which I prioritize growth, like number one, the number one thing in my life is growth. And so for that reason, I think being with an ISFP has been really good for developing that sensing function and helping me integrate with society a little bit more. Who should an INTJ be friends with? You know, I think it's good to surround yourself. Get yourself an INTP, an ENTP, an INFP, an ENFP, an ISFP. Those are the real bros right there. That's the NP group I really enjoy. And then I've really enjoyed Garrett being an ISFP. INFJ as well. INFJ is a good one. How's like ENFJs? Yeah, you just get yourself a variety. You know what I mean? You can pull different things from different ones. Who are INTJs attracted to? You know, ultimately, if I was going to say what personality type do I find the most attractive, I say ENTPs. I find ENTPs the most attractive. Now, that being said, there's always something about ENTPs, whether there's evidence or not, there's always something about them that just seems untrustworthy. And whenever I almost dated an ENTP, I got like very, very close, and I was just like, I think he's gonna cheat on me at some point. No evidence per se, but I just thought it was gonna happen. So they just always have this vibe of untrustworthiness. But I'm most attracted to them, and I think that they're the coolest. I'm also very attracted to INFPs. Now, the thing about INFPs is sometimes I just have these two things I want. I want someone very emotional, so the FP gives me that. On the same time, I want someone who's like kind of on top of their shit and can like help me grow and push back on what I say sometimes, you know. So for that reason, I think that's why SE has been a good function. SE is it's kind of a courageous function, so I think being with an SE user has been good in that regard. INTJ who doesn't plan. Odds are you may not be, INTJ who doesn't plan. I think any type could do anything, I'll just say that, but NI is insanely futuristic. And TE likes to put plans in order to get there. And so those top two functions put together are basically planning functions. A very, very, very common mistype are INTPs, thinking they're INTJs. And INTPs I don't think plan that much. But INTPs lead with a J function. So that's why they think they're Js, because people have a misunderstanding about what J even means. And that maybe J means you're organized. And all the ITPs I know are very organized. So I think it's just a misunderstanding of what J even means. But anyways, if you're kind of quirky and you're funny and maybe you're into IT and maybe you like manga and anime and Reddit, that's more of an INTP thing. And I think INTJs are more so into planning, working in a big business, being a CEO, organizing a lot of people, leading externally. I think INTPs have internal leadership and INTJs have external leadership. So if you're an INTJ who doesn't plan, you may want to rethink. It could happen. I don't want to say anything couldn't happen, but NI, you just can't get away from NI being an INTJ, and yeah, I'd say that's a long shot. INTJ, who do you usually go for? I have a repeated history of INFPs flocking to me and going to INFPs as well. We're just match made in heaven, me and the IFPs. INTJ, who to date? I would say ISFP or INFP. Who INTJ should marry? INFP, ISFP. How to get an INTJ back? My predominant thing, and I think NITE just lend themselves to this, are continuous growth. And so if you broke up, it's probably because the INTJ wasn't seeing a future with you. And so you're going to have to significantly change your behavior and show that you are very growth oriented, and that maybe even if you're not there right now, you will get there sometime in the future. Like, as a side note, my husband and I separated for a little while, and when we separated, he showed tremendous growth. All of a sudden, he was like going to counseling, reading a bunch of books on like what it means to be masculine, all this stuff. His job started changing. Anyways, he put together all this stuff, and he has sustained it, and so that's what got me back, I guess, as an example. Books INTJs will love. You know, in general, I've always loved anything related to growth. And so I've liked personal growth books if I'm more in an NI-FI mood, and I've liked business, entrepreneurial growth books if I'm in more of a TE-NI mood. What I'm trying to do is right now encourage, like, for example, I have a pile of books next to me, I'll show you. This chair is squeaking. Not farting, I promise. Like, for example, I've historically read, like, if I'm in an NITE mood, we got Fix This Next, Profit First, the same author. I got a couple books from him. But one thing I've been trying recently is to encourage myself to read more SEFI books, because I basically exhausted the business section. I went through a period of time where I was reading a book a day, and it was always in the business section. So I've just exhausted the business section. And I think it's just a good growth strategy in general for me to now try to look at some SEFI books. So, like, this is one that I like, this Don't Keep Your Day Job, but you can just tell by this cover that it's, like, how colorful it is. That's more of a SEFI book. I actually really liked this book a lot. I didn't think that I would like this book as much, but this one I thought it might be cheesy, but I really liked it. There was some really good stuff in here. One thing that I do when I read is I always highlight the things as I go, because if I thought a book was good, I want to be able 2 years from now to just go back and skim. I don't necessarily want to have to reread everything. I just want to reread the meat and the stuff that I found really good, so I always highlight as I go. And that's why I like to buy books. INTJ, Will to Power. What does that mean? How do you pronounce Nietzsche? His concept, Will to Power, which just basically is like in overcoming and doing what's authentic to you and not just living with what the masses want. And I was just reading about in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this never clicked for me, but belonging is at a more basic level than self-esteem. So, which makes sense. You need to belong with the group. What that means is sometimes a lot of people will put more emphasis on what society tells them to do, or like TE might place an emphasis on what's a good job to have, more so than what they actually want to do. And building their self-esteem, they might sacrifice their sense of self-esteem for belonging. And so anyways, that reminds me of this Will to Power. It's like having power over your own life, and I think that that's a huge concept. Will INTJ protect ENFP? Yeah, I think that INTJs can be very protective. My sister's an ENFP. I was quite protective over her. I'm quite protective over any person that I'm in relationship with, especially any of the FPs, because I think they have a strong sense of self, but sometimes if someone criticizes them, they might not push back, and so I very willingly will step in on behalf of them. Will an INTJ make the first move? I would say that somewhat depends. I think extroverted thinking is a function that would make the first move, so it's just a matter of how well that's developed. In general, just left to their own devices, if they're not particularly interested in personal growth and developing their second function, they probably won't make the first move. Will an INTJ cheat? Yeah, I think any personality would cheat. Will an INTJ come back? Like I've said, I've came back. That's an example. I think any personality could be gone forever. I think any personality could come back. It really depends on a lot on the other individual. What INTJs think of INFJs? I really enjoy INFJs. Great NI conversations. I think they're very mature, very grounded. There's something very mature about them. Like in honesty, what I don't like about INFJs is their second and third functions, depending on if they're healthy. Like if they have really developed FE in a offensive rather than defensive way, if they're using it actively instead of passively, I enjoy that. I just enjoy people when they're healthy in their second function. But when they're in their third function, I just really don't like anyone in their third function. Especially IFJs, that TI, man, that can be so condescending and know-it-all-ish. But it's hard to say. Like I think one thing about like INFJs is I think culture encourages men to be in TI more than FE, and it encourages women to be in FE more than TI. So the IFJs I've met can be pretty different. Like a lot of the INFJ guys I meet are heavily in TI, and the women that I meet are heavily in FE, and it's almost it's almost on both sides to their detriment. So depending on what you do, you may have to work on one more than the other. What INTJs think of ENFPs? Really enjoy ENFPs, super creative, super fun. When FI is developed, they're so authentic, so real, a lot of depth. What INTJ am I? Maybe they mean turbulent or assertive. I don't know that much about turbulent or assertive. What INTJ likes? I like skyscrapers, freeway systems. I like monthly planning, yearly planning, quarterly planning. I love all the stages of planning and then breaking that with TE, like breaking it down. I love setting goals. I love achieving goals ahead of time. I love pondering, reading books, going on bike rides, listening to podcasts. I love long showers, listening to podcasts. What INTJ wants in a relationship? The number one thing that I want is continuous growth of both parties, just like honesty and two people that are willing to continuously grow and better themselves. And if someone is committed to constantly growing, I could be with any personality type. People that are willing to get uncomfortable, willing to stretch themselves, willing to experiment with different personal growth strategies and not just writing it off initially. People that are willing to make tough decisions. They're willing to quit their job. They're willing to move across the country. They're, willing to take control of their life. Basically, people that have a sense of personal responsibility and like not a victim nature that's like, oh, I guess I just can't do the job I want because I'm stuck in this city and now I'm too old. And excuses, like if anyone has excuses, like I don't want to be with them. I don't want to be with people that make excuses. I want to be with people that make actions. What an INTJ hates. I hate small talk. I hate stories. I hate social norms. It's going to be, quite frankly, it's going to be a lot of FESI things. So that tends to be like stories. Like people will tell stories that other personalities just seem enthralled by. Like they'll just tell about this story of this time that they came upon a bear and someone almost died. And I'm just like, interesting. I don't know why I'm just like not interested by it. What INTJ means. So I guess it stands for introvert, intuitive, thinking, judger. And that ends up being a code for cognitive functions, which you don't know what that are. I have a video where I kind of explain like from the beginning. Which MBTI does INTJ hate? I think MBTI stands for a Myers-Briggs type indicator, so that's the test. So that's like saying which test does the INTJ hate? Anyways, whatever. But they're basically just saying which type do they hate. Wow, man, really putting me on the spot. I'll just give the PC answer real quick so that no one hates me in the comments. FI is gonna. I like any type that is healthy, meaning they develop their second function. Least favorite type, ESFJ, probably. I'm so sorry. But I know some ESFJs that I really like. Which is better, INTJ or INTP? What a classic. Just the narcissism of INTJs, my gosh. Neither type is better, obviously. They're better at different things. I mean, I think an INTJ is going to be better at leading a group of people efficiently, being in charge of 20 people, having a goal, making a plan that takes 3 months and getting there. An INTP is going to be a lot better at working independently, slowly, methodically, very precise, very accurate, technical skills, with the big picture thinking, with NE. So they think of like these big picture solutions and they kind of organize it with TI very precisely. So I think INTPs are better with the knowledge and INTJs are better with the leveraging of the knowledge for perhaps personal growth or personal gain. How INTJ shows affection. I stereotypically think of showing, any type shows affection, but I stereotypically think of if I was going to pin that with one function, I like maybe the feeling functions, particularly FE. That's a hard thing. I have a hard time showing affection. I have an insanely hard time complimenting people. Hard time telling people I love them or that I like them or I like being friends with them. I have a hard time initiating hanging out with people. For some reason, that just seems so vulnerable to like initiate hanging out. Let's say I've hung out with them 20 times. It still is like vulnerable for me to initiate things. So yeah, it's probably minimally. How INTJs study. Studying is pretty easy. I think INTJs are pretty good at studying. Occasionally, if I don't know, and let's say it's a class that I didn't like, for example, history. I can't stand history. And so I basically just wouldn't pay attention all class, and then I would cram the day before, and I'm pretty good at cramming flashcards. For whatever reason, I'll just make connections. Like my husband was just studying for a personal training exam, and there was a bone. I don't remember what the question was about. There's a question about bones, and the answer to the question on the flashcard was remodeling. And I just make a connection because I'll then picture in my head, like, if you remodel a house, you've got all the planks or whatever. Oh my gosh, my vocab for building stuff is not good. And so I just pictured a bunch of bones being all the boards that would normally be there. Anyway, so I make random pictures in my mind that associate the question and the answer. So I do that a lot of the times. How INTJs express love. That's back to the same question that I think is kind of difficult. Helping the other person grow. That's one thing I've set up with my husband. I've set up personal growth plans, or I've helped him project plan, or helped him brainstorm. I think it's just kind of like helping them out in my skill sets. How INTJ thinks. I think it's a big way that I think is, how do I want the future to look? How do I need to grow to get there? And that's kind of NI. And then it follows TE up with, okay, like, how can we make sure that this gets done? How can we make sure that this plan's going to work? Okay, so we're going to write down the goal in a place we can see it. We're going to plan. We're going to take the 50-year goal, chunk it down into 10-year goals, into 5-year goals. And we kind of like chunk down these plans. So that's a big way that I think. It's like, I think of the future, and then I think of like, how can I organize how I want it to get there? So I think of things in terms of how productive they may be. With TE, will they work? I also sometimes think of things in, are they ethical or moral? How INTJ deals with stress? Yeah, what a question. I've been stressed out lately. What I did this last weekend, I did a no tech weekend. So I didn't get on any technology, no screen time, no nothing. And that was good. I ended up doing a lot of reading. But I still, what I think is best is to kind of like empty out your thoughts. And so then when I replaced it with reading, like reading's not bad, but then it was still just kind of putting a lot more input. And what I need is to decrease the input so I can just hear myself think and figure out what the issue is. With stress, I try to figure out like, what's the cause of it? How can I troubleshoot it and get this done with? Because if I don't figure it out soon enough, I can crash. If I can crash, and I can feel very sad and mopey and unproductive, and that can definitely happen. So I try to cut that off before it gets to that point. How INTJs flirt. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of flirting. Like, I think I just kind of like let them come to me, and then I'll try to keep the conversation going for as long as possible. But I'm like, I won't look, like if I have a crush on someone, I don't look at them. I don't initiate a conversation, even though I really want them to. And I'll be looking at them across the room, but I don't want them to know that I'm looking at them. And then if they come over and initiate a conversation, I'll try to keep it going for like, as long as I can. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, that's basically that. Flirting's not very good, but basically just like trying to make jokes. I've read books on flirting. I've read all sorts of articles, which all I think are just dumb. Like any attempt, like any sort of those strategies, like don't work. You basically just have to be present. I think it's just SE. It's like in my INTJ, what video was it? I think it was social skills. There are a lot of flirting techniques in there. Actually, you might want to look at that video. It wasn't really meant to be about flirting, but a lot of the principles I talk about in that video could be then applied to flirting. How INTJs fall in love. I think what happens is I'm around, like with my husband, for example, I was around him and I really enjoyed his company. So then I started liking him. And then as soon as I start liking someone, I get into like NITE mode. I'm like, is this going to work out long term? And my whole philosophy is like, if it's not going to work 10 years from now, I don't want to give it another 10 minutes. And that's just the philosophy that I've always had. And so I then get into like 10 years from now, could this work? And I'm like, because FI is just so sensitive, it's so vulnerable. It's a pure little function. And I don't want to traumatize it for someone that's like not even going to be around, which maybe is a bad thing. It's probably better to just do the risky action, put yourself out on the line. Because at the same time, there are people I didn't pursue things with, and then that had left like an open loop, like what could that have been? And so it leaves some questions. So it's probably better to just jump in. But needless to say, I hadn't done that. So I just started thinking about like, could this work long term? And then if NI and TE get on board, then I will allow people to see FI. Oh, nice. That's all of them. That's all the questions. There were some repeats, so it wasn't a full 78 questions, but because there were several of them that were like basically the same question. They were repeats. So yeah, I have other INTJ videos. I have a couple that describe growth strategies and cognitive functions. I have a bunch of versus videos, like INTJ versus INFJ. I think INTJ versus ISTJ, INTJ versus ISTP, a bunch of random videos. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those, you can check those out. I have some others like INTJs in a loop, INTJ social skills, INTJ emotions, INTJ spouse. Anyways, a bunch of videos, a bunch of INTJ videos. Actually, you can go to my channel in the search bar, type in INTJ, you can see all sorts of stuff. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye.